give a round of applause for Johnny leading us this morning? Always love the long clap. I do it. Well, hello friends, my name is Joe Ratterman, and I have the privilege of serving as the pastor here at Numa Community Church. And I don't know about you guys, but this last week, with all that's kind of going on in the world, I was really struck by a couple of stories in the news that kind of rose above the rest. The first being the president of Ukraine, Zelensky's kind of response to what's been going on. I don't know if you guys saw this, but here's bombs are like falling literally left and right around the capital city, and the U.S. offers him safe passage out of the country so that he can be doing his duties kind of outside of the country. And logically that makes sense. It's like, yes, like if something were to happen to him, morale of the country just falls apart. He can do a lot of that stuff outside of Ukraine. But just in this moment of just like kind of almost like immediate response, Zelensky, he says, no, the fight is here. I'm going to stay here. I just think about that moment. That was a moment that was surprising. It wasn't out of character, but it was something that revealed his character. Something that was true before, but is on full display in a moment like that. I think about another moment. It happened in northern Macedonia, where the president of that country found out that there was a little 11-year-old girl with Down syndrome that was being bullied at school, like kind of repeatedly. And so he clears out his schedule. He makes plans to walk this little girl to school each day. It's kind of a declaration of like, I stand with you, I'm with you, and what's kind of going on. That's another moment that it's not necessarily out of character, but it revealed his character in that moment. Now, those are like famous people doing famous things, and it can be kind of hard to relate with them because we're not presidents of countries quite yet. But then I think about some of our very own. A couple of weeks ago, a couple in our midst was going through a big kind of like family, got some family news that was really tough. Kaylin and Troy camping about like, hey, this couple's in need, and like within the hour they had organized a meal train to deliver meals. Within like just that day, they were moving boxes and helping them with some manual labor. And it was many of you guys who provided meals to show care in that time and opened up your houses. Like those are moments that aren't out of character, but moments that reveal your character. Today we're kicking off a series called Last Words of Jesus, in which we're looking at Jesus' last words to his closest followers. And as much as we're going to be spending time on his last words, it's his first action in this like last discourse. That is a similar moment that is not out of character, but revealed his character. He does something so surprising, so shocking, that we're literally talking about it 2,000 years later. So if you guys have your Bibles, go ahead and flip them open. If you're using one of the paper ones, we're going to be on page 507. And we're going to be in John chapter 13. John chapter 13, we read this. It says, it was just before the Passover festival, and Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and the devil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. And here's the verse that we're going to kind of camp out on for a little bit. It says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So, and we're going to stop like right there, first word of the chapter, verse 4. So here's Jesus knowing that all power, all authority, all dominion has been given to him. This is him knowing that he came from the Father and that he's returning to the Father. He came from God and he's going back to God. You can imagine this moment, like this is Jesus' moment. He's made it. Like literally all power that could be given to him is given to him in this moment. What does he do? What would we do given all power, all authority on heaven and earth? You know, I look at the world around us, the people in the highest places of prestige and honor. I mean, they've got the biggest offices, the biggest salaries, the biggest influence. Would we kick back? We relax? Now it's time for other people to serve us. Like, that's an expected human response. But what Jesus does is so shocking. In verse 4, it says, so he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. What? Like, if we let this really soak in, this doesn't make any sense. Did I read the wrong passage? After this, after knowing that God had given him all power, all authority, his response to that was to get up from the meal, take off his outer clothing, wrap a towel around his waist, and begin to wash his disciples' feet. That's significant. And maybe we read this passage a little bit differently based on the condition of your feet. My wife has perfect feet. It's her favorite feature. She just has perfectly shaped feet, recently pedicured, smooth, she's got nice feet. I have not so nice feet. I've got the stinkiest feet. I can destroy a pair of shoes in just an hour. Just pure. Does any other stinky feet people brave enough to admit it? Let's go. You're my people. I want to give you a guess of what kind of the feet his disciples had. Many of them fishermen in open-toed shoes, slipping around on slimy fishing boats. Open-toe shoes in a culture that was largely agricultural. They're not just stepping on dirt. This is some yucky feet. This is Joe Ratterman feet that he's washing in this moment. And yet Jesus, he gets up from the table and he washes his disciples' feet. Jesus, in this moment, flips the organizational chart. He flips the org chart. It's not supposed to be like this. People at the top are the ones that are to be served, and the ones underneath them are to serve them. And here in this moment, Jesus having all authority, all power, all dominion, we find him taking the role of a servant and washing his disciples' feet. If we were to really grasp this reality, it's uncomfortable. Because it's not supposed to be like that. That's very abnormal. And that's Peter's response in verse 6. It says he came to Simon Peter, who said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't realize now what I'm doing, but later you will understand." "No," said Peter, "you shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered, "Unless I wash you, then you have no part with me." "Then, Lord, not just my feet, but my hands and my head as well," Peter says. That's a natural human response. That's what any of us would respond in a moment like that. It's so uncomfortable to be served like that. I remember it was a number of years back, I was in a small group with a bunch of guys, and we read this passage, and we were chewing on it. We're like, this is awesome, all these little details. And then at the end of it, as we're closing up our Bibles, the small group leader's like, "All right, now I'm going to wash your feet." That gets real awkward real quick. Because once again, remember the condition of my feet. I got real stinky feet. Everyone's going to know my feet the moment I take my shoes off. That was the moment. And yet, this small group leader got down on his knees and washed each of our feet. And I instantly and intimately understood Peter's objection in that moment of no, this is so uncomfortable. And yet, I think Jesus has something in this for us. We're going to get to the serving part. We're called to serve. Jesus serves. We get that. But before we ever get to that place, I think we have to be willing to be served in order to serve. That's part and parcel of what it means to be a follower of Jesus, is not only serving him and serving others, but allowing ourselves to be served. So my question for you this morning is, what's your typical response when people offer to serve you? To bring you a meal, to pay for a meal, to offer to help. If you're anything like me, my gut reaction is typically no, I'm good, or thanks, but no thanks, we've got it. That's so Midwest, that's very what it means to be American, is to say, no, I'm good. But I think if we were to examine that a little bit, we'd find kind of like Peter, there's an element of pride kind of beneath that, not wanting to be a burden on other people. That Jesus wants to address, that before we're ever in a place to be able to serve others, we have to be willing to be served ourselves. It's a humbling experience. So my challenge for you guys is, next time that someone offers to serve you, say, okay, say yes. Next time someone offers to bring you a meal, say, sure. Next time someone offers to buy you coffee or to pay for something, say, thank you. Don't miss out on God's trying to bless you and care for you like Peter had in this moment. To serve, we have to be willing to be served. So that's kind of the first part of what I think Jesus is doing in this moment. But the question is, why would he do this? Why in this moment? His last words, his last actions, would he drop to his knees and wash his disciples' feet? Well, fortunately, he tells us in verse 12, it says, when he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. He said, do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightfully so, for that's what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set for you an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly, I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a master greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them. Jesus is super clear. He did this as an example for us that we might do the same thing. This is our example. That in these moments, we don't elevate ourselves, we elevate others. And we lower ourselves to serve. And he tells us in verse 17 that not only are we to do this because that's our example, but he tells us that we'll be blessed when we do it. Similar to what we had talked about a couple of weeks ago, this word blessed, it comes from the Greek word makarios, which means to be favored or to find happiness. He tells us that when we serve others, we'll find joy. When we put others' needs before ourselves, we'll find happiness. And it's kind of one of those things, I don't know about you, but it's one of those truths that we kind of shrug and we're like, yeah. Okay, that's true, but not really true. Or like we've heard it before, but in practice, that's not how it quite works out. It's one of those truths that doesn't appear true. But from experience, it is true. I think about a number of years back, I took a group of high school students on a mission trip. And anytime you go on a mission trip, there's usually a handful of students that are there because their parents lovingly forced them to go. There's always that group of students, and I remember there was a particular group of students that just was not having it. They were dragging their feet. You just had to ask them 3 times to go anywhere or do anything. And we were doing hard work. We were painting houses in like an underdeveloped neighborhood, and it was like in the hot summer day, just like painting, and these girls were not having any of it. But yet, those same students, 3 days later, were the last ones to put the paintbrush down at the end of the day. That were complaining because now we have to go home, I don't want to go home. And 2 years later, kind of reflecting on high school and all the experiences they had, they would name that as one of their best experiences, one of their favorite memories. There's something that comes alive in us when we serve. And you guys can probably add your own experiences to that. Times that you've cared for someone or served and it sounded awful, helping someone move, and then you just loved doing it. There's something that comes alive in us when we serve. And so what I'd like for us to talk about, this is the movement that Jesus has for us in this passage, is a move from elevating ourselves to elevating others. And the movement to lower ourselves to serve others. But practically, what does that look like? And so at our tables, I would love for us to discuss what does it look like to flip the org chart like Jesus did. To put others' needs before our own, to serve others. And specifically, I'd love for us to talk about it in 3 kind of spheres of life. First being the workplace. What does it look like to flip the org chart and to serve those that are underneath of us? What does that look like in our neighborhoods, to serve our neighbors and the places that God has placed us? And then third, what does it look like to serve others in our friendships? If this is your first time here, we're a pretty interactive church. We think that there's a ton that we can learn from one another. We all bring perspectives and experiences that we can learn from. So just discuss at your tables. We've got about 5 minutes, and I'd love to hear from each table some of the ideas that kind of pop up. Sound good? All right, 5 minutes. Awesome. Let's go ahead and hear from each different tables. I'm going to put you guys on the spot because my wife's up there. Sweet.
I talked about how my employees are very easy to serve because they demand it, my children. And
here, wait, I think we've got a mic. I think we can do this. Passing the mic.
Loud.
Oh my gosh. So yeah, work. Jeremy talked about just like a lot of his employer or fellow employees are like super negative, and so just even like being a positive person around them feels like serving them. And they work remote, so it's hard to like, how do I physically serve them? But just kind of being the person that isn't talking negative or whatever is serving them. And we talked about neighbors, and I talked about our neighbors who like very much don't want a relationship or like are very standoffish, but our kids really like to play together. So it's like, how do you figure out how to lovingly serve them when they're putting up like very firm, like, I don't know. So just figuring out that dynamic of like neighboring is different than it was 25 years ago. And that doesn't mean that like we shouldn't be good neighbors, but how do you like kind of reteach people how to be good neighbors when they're acting like they don't?
Hey, do people ring doorbells still? Can you do that? Is that socially acceptable?
Yeah, Caleb, like people do it.
I was like, I remember growing up, like if I wanted to play with somebody, I would ring their doorbell, but then I found myself trying to teach Liam that I'm like, this is different. Like, I don't know if you can do that anymore.
Well,
And both cars were there, the garage door was open, and Liam was just pushing the doorbell and nobody came. I'm just like, they're probably hiding something in the house. It is, neighboring is different, but we're so called to do it.
yeah, and I mean, working is different too. So it's like, yeah, how do you serve people when it just looks different than, you know, bringing someone a coffee physically at work when you don't physically work with them, you know?
Yep.
So just trying to be creative. That's all we got.
Good. Hand the mic or throw the mic? Don't throw the mic. Trent would not have that.
All right. So we talked, Logan and I talked a lot about in the workplace how our service is a lot of our time. We work with a lot of younger, new hires that may need our time to help learn. It may be more efficient or quicker for us to just do something, but to pour your time into other people to help them learn. So we talked about serving that way in the workplace. Ashley talked about in the neighborhood environment, especially in their neighborhood. She gives her time to some of maybe the older people in the neighborhood that are home all day that may need just somebody to talk to, just sometimes spend socializing, and how that really makes both parties feel good. And then we talked a lot about community as well. I know one thing I mentioned on community is that I've got a 2-year-old son, and I've seen how other people maybe take their kids to community service events, and how that's just awesome for their kids to see that, and how we feel after we've participated in a community service event, how that really warms the heart of the person that's doing the service. And then the last thing we kind of talked about was in line with Jesus washing people's feet. If we turn people down, we're depriving them. If they're trying to serve us, we're depriving them of that good feeling of serving somebody else. I've never really thought about it that way, especially if it's the first time they really went out to try to serve somebody and you shoot them down, then they're, they may not want to do that again.
Sure. Great job summarizing, dude. That was fantastic. You did everything, I think. Dan!
Okay, so when we were talking, we were kind of summarizing like things in our life that we do kind of to help serve others. And I know Johnny said he's big into like asking people if they want to go get coffee, or I gave an example of, as a coach, I try and reach out to some of my students who may be struggling academically and, provide some tutoring services for them. And sometimes we kind of talked as a group that we occasionally have trouble receiving when somebody wants to help serve us, and kind of the dynamic that brings along with it, and how sometimes you just need to accept those kind of open arms and accept those gifts that God's blessing you with.
Yeah, love that.
Okay, great.
Go ahead. Yeah, hand the mic. Nobody wants it. It's like hot potato.
Yeah, at our table, a few things. I'll make sure I don't eat the mic. A few things. No. One big thing that Kelsey brought up, of course, was neighborhood, right? And of course, assisting others in your neighborhood who may have had a partner over 50 years and now don't have that partner anymore, right? They need companionship. They need you to, of course, reach out to that. Hey, you need a meal? Hey, you need some coffee? Hey, you need some tea? But also, hey, can I come sit with you and watch Jeopardy? Hey, how's that Wheel of Fortune game going, right? Just spend time with that individual, making sure you care about them and you're showing it via your time, right? Also, in the workplace, we discussed ways of maybe going interdepartmentally. We all have our usual team we interact with on a daily basis. Maybe you look at that org chart, like you mentioned, Joe. Go find a different department, different email address you never interacted with before. Shoot them a DM on Monday. Happy Monday, hope you have a fantastic week, right? Just small things like that that could have an impact on someone's life that you have no idea just how you know that may be for that individual. Let's we talk about this, right?
That's good. All right, last table.
I think what we talked about was summarized by everyone else here as well. But I think one thing as precedent that Tamara talked about was really focusing on being efficient with your time. Because to be able to help others, you kind of have to have that time to be able to. If you're always so busy, kind of making yourself busy, you're never going to have time to like reach out to a neighbor, do something kind for them if you're not being efficient with your time. And you know, with business, reaching out to people. In my industry, you know, my boss does a great job of calling people up all the time because he's very efficient and just talking to people. And then the guys that can get you quick budget on something or can reach out to you quickly, and that's great for business. And it, you know, if you're efficient with your time, well, I got time, I'm gonna go bake a bread for my neighbors. So that was kind of something that we talked about that added on to whatever people had. So.
Yeah, just the importance of having some margin in your life so that you can see a need and do something about it. See, that's awesome. I like just the applications that rise up. You guys have great ideas, and I think we can learn a ton from each other in those kind of moments. But those moments to serve each other, I mean, they're all around us. We just have to have eyes to see them.